In the last video I made a CAD model of the gyrosphere, sort of like what's in Jurassic Park, but one that would actually work properly. I got a lot of great comments. One of those was to make an RC model, so that's what I did. I spent quite a bit of time making this thing, and it did work. It steered really well by shifting the weight left and right, and you could go in really tight circles with it. But it was a little bit hard to drive dead straight because it would try to flop from one side to the other. I think it needs a bit of a flat spot in the center. But it was a good idea of how everything was going to work. I bought this super cheap little RC car for $15, and quite amazing all the functions it had for that cheap. And so I ended up playing with this for way too long, driving it around everywhere. It was a bit gutless, but still fun all the same. It was supposed to be a rock crawler, but I couldn't really crawl many rocks. So I ended up taking it apart to make my ball thing. In this shot you can see a little bit easier how it moves. As I was building this, I realised I could do the whole thing with just the 3D printer and this toy car, which you can get at like Kmart in New Zealand or Walmart in America. You could probably get it off AliExpress as well. So with just this and a little bit of wire, a 3D printer, you can make the whole thing using all of the parts inside the RC car. Just got to make sure you get one that's pretty much the same model. I'm sure the bottom half on all of them is the same. So this is the tiny little controller it comes with, made for kids' hands, but left and right shifts the weight inside and leans it from side to side, and then you just push forward to go. This thing would barely move on the grass, as it would just go round and round in circles, which is the downside to all of these mono wheel type designs. Works alright in this shot, but that's because it's actually rolling down a little bit of a hill. But when it's on flat ground, it just goes round and round in circles. The counterweight's nowhere near enough. For some reason it'll move side to side easier. I think that's because this weight is all below the center line this way, but there is weight above the center line this way, perhaps. So will this happen on the full scale model as well? It probably will to some extent. As you accelerate hard, you'll just flip around, the passengers will just go upside down, and it won't basically go anywhere. There's a few things you can do to mitigate this. Is you could use lead acid batteries in the bottom, which are much heavier. I could use 6 of them, and also they wouldn't catch on fire as easily, less dangerous. And I can also lower the passengers right down, so this makes the effects better as well. And I'd have to only drive this thing on sort of flat ground, flat muddy ground, or I could put a wheel out the back that I can flip from front to back to push on the ground to drive, or just have the motor on the lever arm. But this is getting pretty close to Grindhard Plumbing's thing they're already making. Another thing people suggested is to put a hatch in the roof so I can roll it over and exit out there if something bad happens. Physics don't seem to work the same to scale models as they do in real life in full scale. Like you can't go driving a car off a shipping container and it'd be fine. It'd be smashed to pieces. So that's something else to consider. This is what's inside and how it works. I've taken the motor out of the RC car, and that just drives the gear, which runs on the outside. And then for steering, it just moves this ballast left and right. Inside this dumpster looking thing is just a pile of stones. You can use anything in here, but stones is what I had. And that is just the ballast to help you turn left and right, and also lets it go forwards and backwards easier. The rest of this video will be about how you can make this ball thing yourself for your own little toy, and you can try out the gyroscope or something here instead. I'll just quickly show you this CAD model of how it all goes together. You can actually change around the gearing if you want to make it go a bit faster. Change that big main gear there, the 55 tooth, and change the other one as well. But this is basically how it all works. It steers left to right, moving the counterbalance. So let's see if we can make it. After you've brought your RC car, make sure the chassis and everything's the same as this one, and you can start pulling it to bits. These are the parts you need to take out of it. So that's the rear axle, take the whole thing out. You need the battery and the radio controller thing. I just cut all the linkages off with the suspension arms with some scissors. And the little motor you see there is a steering motor. They have a little white thing on the end of both sides, so keep one of them on and chop off the one that's closest to the motor. And you also need to pop off the little gear that's on the steering motor with a knife or a screwdriver or whatever you got. You also need to make sure you keep these front spindles of the front axle and as many of these little screws as you can. They all get used again, and obviously keep the controller as well. You got to print out these M8x8 bolts, 3 of those, the washers to fit them as well, and also print out one of the longer bolts. I think it's M8x40. And there's some tools you can print out as well. 13mm spanner. Print all of these bolts at like a high quality setting so they print nice, the threads are all clean on them, they should work. I put a bit of clearance in them. Then print out all these little gears, one of each of all of those, and also print those on a high setting as well because these need to be pretty accurate and you need to spend a bit of time cleaning them up. Then print all the rest of the parts, and these can all be printed on a lower setting except for that big pin piece. Print that on a high setting as well, and maybe that little washer. But everything else can be printed on a fast setting. This is the main axle. You put this gear on here, shove the pin through that hole, put this little bush inside the swing arm, get this gear and put the little one inside it. It's quite of a tight fit, and you can use a screw to screw it in there. You could even put a bit of glue in there if you want to, but I didn't. Make sure that's all cleaned up and fits in there nicely. Also, all the screws that you want to put together, make sure you go around first and just go around all those small holes and do this so everything screws together a bit easier. Then that jack shaft gear will go into the bush, just like that. Then you can put the swing arm onto the other part. You make sure that runs nice and smoothly. You could put a little bit of grease or something on there if you like to, but I didn't. Put a washer on the little M8 bolt and put that in the end. Just be aware, don't do these up too tight because they're only plastic and you'll snap it off inside there like I did and you can't get them out. You have to reprint them. Do them up with your little spanner. You can use a normal 13mm spanner if you've got one, but I just printed these in case some people don't. Here we go. That should all run really smooth. You could put another bolt into the back here to hold it, but you don't really need to. I just leave it out, to be honest. I left room for it, but there's no point. And then get your little rubbish bin thing, and another bolt holds that on. You don't really need a washer on it. And put that onto the swing arm. It's a bit fiddly getting this part on, and then you use that socket extension to do that bolt up the rest of the way. Make sure it's this way up when you put it together. Then you're going to put the motor axle through this hole, motor side towards the frame, and then this little cap goes on top. Just be careful screwing this piece in because I made it a bit thin actually. It might split the plastic, so just be careful with this bit. Someone could redesign it if they want. Then you take the little gear that's got the hex in it, slide it over that other axle, and screw a screw into the end of it. I just use one of these little tiny screws. There's 2 sizes of screws that you get, and I just use one of the really little ones in here. Now take this weird little square piece with the round shaft and this washer that's got a square cut out, and you'll see a little indent there. If you put that in, it'll end up flush. If it doesn't, you put it round the wrong way.
Then put on that 55 tooth gear. Then a really small washer goes on there that should be printed, and a screw. Now take the front axles and push them into the main axle part. This is quite hard to push in, and there's a top that goes on as well, and also those aren't printed very well either. You've got to really push them on, and they tend to crack when you do the bolts up, but they work. It's a nice tight fit, so it won't come apart. I only put 2 screws in my ones too. This tiny little gear is probably the most important to do a good job cleaning up. Probably don't use a knife like I am, but make sure that gear is nice and push that onto the motor. It's quite hard to push it on. You can lay it flat and use the tool to push it on the shaft, and that should be nice and tight on there, and that should work well. Then the wires are going to be very close to the edges of the terminals, and shove that in. You don't actually need to cut and lengthen this wire, I don't think. Make sure that hole's nice and clear too, because it's a very tight fit in there. You'll see which way it goes up. Push that in and line them up. That should also move pretty freely. This piece here bolts onto the battery box. Can only really go on one way. I've modified the drawing a little bit so it's a bit better than this piece. So screw that on. Should be some holes provided. If you've got a different kind of a battery, which I think some of these cars come with, you might have to tape it on there or fit it another way. Grab this triangle piece and a long bolt and a washer, and that just goes straight through the main center axle frame and bolts that piece on. It goes on the opposite side to the motor to try and balance it out a bit. Once you have that part bolted up loosely, you can move the battery back and forth a little bit to get the balance just right, so it'll ride nice and straight. See, I've got it pretty good there. And then do it up tight once you're happy with how it balances. Need to be lengthened. You can leave the steering motor ones the same length, I think, but you need to lengthen the ones that go to the motor. If you don't have a soldering iron, you can just twist the ends of the wire together and tape them up. Not a lot of power going through this thing, so it should be alright. Switch on your controller and your receiver and make sure everything works. You get your ballast and chuck it in there. Throw some stones in there, or some sand, or maybe dirt, nuts, washers, whatever you've got that's pretty heavy. Then stick your lid on there. Best to tape this lid on because it doesn't sit on there that well. And just use some tape to stick your aerial wire somewhere to the frame, and you're pretty much ready to go. Print out each hemisphere, and then with the one that says DK on it, lay that down and push it in. It's also quite a tight hex in there. The little screws only go in one way. Put the other half on. You have to do the same thing, push it on quite hard, and take a while to line the screws up. This part's a little bit difficult, but you can do it. You can even switch it on, getting your fingers through the holes and switching the switch on to go, and you can even change the batteries when it's all together by using a screwdriver in the hole, the little holes that I'm sticking my finger through there. So it's a little bit fiddly getting this part together, but just be aware the screws only go through one way. And that's it, you're ready to go. All these print files will be free on Thingiverse, and also the step file, so you can do your own modifications to it if you like. As much as I'd love to start doing this project, I can't really do it. I'm waiting for shoulder surgery, my shoulder keeps dislocating. I've actually 3D printed this thing to hold it in its socket, and I can't really do much. I really miss being out in the shed and welding and doing stuff like that, but I can't do anything. But if there's another YouTuber out there that would like to do this project, I can send you the drawings and I can also help you out with it. Basically just making this little RC toy for something to do. So there might be a couple more projects like this one until I get better. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.
growl you for all this.